Yes, we are a little bit late today. Dan was busy all morning being a dad, and much like Kyler Murray, I would rather be playing Call of Duty than doing any fantasy football stuff this weekend. So I'm exhausted. I've been up since 4 playing this damn game. Thanks a lot, Brian. But we are here. We could not get our guest this week. It was supposed to be Xavier, but the scheduling change screwed up his schedule, and we keep forgetting to ask Rob. So it's another week of me and Dan. Hopefully, we get back on the guest train next week. And we may have special guests because Dan's better half is, I'm guessing, at work. So kids could be making special appearances. But as I get all the way to it, Dan, the owner of the newest divorced quarterback in the NFL, how you doing, buddy?
I'll be doing a lot better if this divorce being final makes Brady a relevant quarterback again.
I mean, he's got to prove to these women that he's fit and he's ready to procreate. So he has to make himself appealing. So I'm hoping that's what's going to happen moving forward for you. I'm really not hoping that.
I am actually really interested to see how this plays out for him. Is that, could that have been a big distraction for him? Absolutely. We'll see. Maybe everything settles down now. Maybe he turns back into the Tom Brady of old and saves my season.
Yeah. I definitely would imagine that you're a better football player when you don't have a supermodel wife. So we'll see how that works out for him. But fuck Tom Brady. I hope it all goes terribly for you and him. Let's get into the trades, everybody.
Well, actually, before we get started, I have one quick thing. If anybody has seen Phil or heard from Phil, let me know. I have not been able to hear from him since last Saturday afternoon at 4:45, 4 o'clock-ish, something like that. I don't know what happened on Saturday, but I have not heard from him at all. I sent him text messages and nothing. Last I heard, he was seen leaving Paul Brown's Tiger Stadium somewhere in the third quarter. Some reason he left early. I don't know why he wanted to leave early, but if anybody's heard from him, let me know. I'm concerned about him.
I love that this started off as you ripping on Phil's fantasy team, but you just can't do that anymore. So now you have to devolve all the way into high school football. The trades. There weren't nearly as many this week, and there were some interesting things that we haven't really had happen before, which I'll get into in a second. So there were only 5 trades. Taylor and Darren, and this was the interesting part, Taylor and Darren made one trade, and then they immediately made another trade. So Taylor brings in Geno Smith because he no longer has a quarterback, and then David Montgomery, TJ Hawkinson, the New England defense, and 11, 12, and 13 by sending Marcus Mariota, Curtis Samuel, Naheem Hines of the Green Bay defense, a 2, a 3, a 9, and a 10. And I'm just going to lump this one back in. Taylor sends another 2 to Darren to grab Michael Carter and a pair of 10s after the Breece Hall injury. Taylor and I do a very quick trade, Melvin Gordon for Kieran Williams. And then the same way that Taylor and Darren did, JR and Kenny make a big trade, and then they make a tiny trade. So the biggest trade of the week, the one we're going to probably spend the most time talking about, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase find their way back to JR's team. Kenny brings in Tua Tagovailoa, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Brian Robinson, Wan'Dale Robinson, the Tennessee defense, a 1, 2, 5, and 7. So he's recouping some of those picks. And then he also recouped a 12 by sending a Kenyon Drake over to JR as well. So Kenny recouping picks. Now it's looking like Jamar Chase is not going to the IR, Dan. So I imagine we're going to talk mostly about this trade. Everything else is pretty much what we expected. Taylor flat out told me he did his trade for bench depth and he doesn't feel like he paid too much. And then I don't think he could have brought in TJ Hawkinson at a better time with David Njoku going down. But was this an overpay for Jamar Chase? Was this an underpay? What are your thoughts on the JR Kenny exchange?
I find it as an interesting trade overall. I think Kenny's kicking himself on this one. I think it was an overreaction to the injury. I think that he's only going to miss 2 games, and then he'll be right back to being Jamar Chase. And I think this trade is going to end up hurting Kenny hard in the long run. I think he could have got more, honestly, if he had traded those guys separately in 2 different trades. Lumping them together, I mean, I
don't know, though, because we talked about this earlier. The Joe Burrow trade value this season has been really weird, where he went for like an 8th earlier in the season when Brian sold him. So I don't know how much Burrow could have really fetched. I mean, obviously he's played very well, so you should want him. I just don't know what it would have turned into with our league.
Burrow went for a 4 earlier this season. But I think now with him playing as well as he is and more teams realizing that, they need a quarterback, myself, Taylor, and with Burrow where he's at, I would have given a lot for Burrow.
And yeah, that's actually a really good point. And when you think about Taylor having all the picks that he has, I don't know if there were offers sent out there, but yeah, that's a really interesting point that Taylor wasn't consorted in any of that. Now, one thing I found interesting when I was digging into this is the declining price, and you hear me correctly, the declining price of Jamar Chase as the season has went, Dan. When the original Jamar Chase trade happened from Kenny to Taylor, Jamar Chase was worth Tyreek Hill, Juju Smith-Schuster, Miles Sanders, a 1 and 3 2s. The next time he was traded from Kenny back to Taylor, he was only worth, from Taylor back to Kenny, he was only worth CeeDee Lamb, Cam Akers, Najee Harris, a 1 and a 2. And then in this trade, he only fetched, no real keepers. Tua, CEH, Wan'Dale, Brian Robinson, the Tennessee Titans, a 1, a 2, a 5, and a 7, and Burrow was included in that trade. So I don't know if it's the injury or we were overpaying earlier in the season or if half of this league is just fucking nuts. But the declining price of Jamar Chase and the trade value is interesting to me, at least. So.
And what's the funniest part about it, and that's why I'm going to go with just nuts thing, because earlier in the year when they were struggling, he was getting more. Now that he's actually proving that they can work through this and play better and better and better, you're getting less for him.
Yeah,
and again, I think, and I don't even know that it's a value is going down. I think it's just Kenny took the first offer that came because he didn't put it out there that he was shopping him. I don't know.
I won't say that he took the first offer because Brian openly admitted to me he sent him a bad offer and then Kenny did not accept that. So me and Brian were talking about this and it's like, I know Kenny's getting frustrated with the bad offers he's getting, but don't accept them. And I don't know if this was a bad offer. Like I said, he at least, I don't know what he did here because he still has Saquon Barkley. He still has Tyreek Hill. He has keepers for next year. He fixes his draft a little bit. Obviously, like you brought up, it could be an overreaction to the Jamar Chase thing. The biggest thing, and we're going to talk about this in a second, is I think he traded himself out of the playoffs. So, he has started himself out of the playoffs, but I think he may have traded himself.
I'm pretty sure that if Kenny was frustrated with bad offers, then anything Brian sent was probably going to get turned down right away. But everybody in this league sends bad offers. There isn't a person in this league I've not received a bad offer from. I'm sure I've sent plenty of bad offers myself just to start a negotiation.
I only send great offers. You guys just decline them. I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah. Okay. Sure thing. We'll start a poll. Has Ryan sent you a bad trade offer and see what that gets?
I can guarantee you that 5 people this league will vote yes because I sent them all trade offers this past week and they all declined pretty quickly. So things didn't quite go the way I wanted them to. Dan, let's get into our week 6 takeaways. I think the biggest takeaway of week 6 and maybe 2022 in general is that if you believe in the fantasy football gods, they fucking hate Steve Horvath. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. A win doesn't matter much to Steve at this point, but beating me, I think, would have been pretty damn sweet for him, especially fucking up my playoffs. Matthew Judon starts off red hot on the Monday night game, but then Ramondre Stevenson just keeps chopping at that tree, catches a ball, and then I immediately say in the group chat that I need New England to throw a pick so Nick Folk can't score any more points. And on the very next play, New England throws a pick. Game over for me. Steve Horvath takes yet another fucking L. He's got to be frustrated, but at least he has a nice nest egg and draft picks for next season.
I don't know that the fantasy gods are against him or they're just with you.
That's fair.
Because you've won a lot of close, low-scoring games that you probably told you before the game started, hey, you're going to score 82 points this week. You're going to expect yourself to lose.
Yeah. I'm definitely pretending this year. It's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but I need 2 more pretending weeks to try to make these playoffs.
I don't even call it pretending because you just don't know what's going to happen. This has been a very unpredictable season. Teams that, look at Greg. Greg started off 0-3. Here he's battling for a spot in the playoffs now.
We were busting his balls about buying, and now he has a legitimate playoff team. So.
Yep.
Very interesting. And then another one I have on here is depending on the week, the league, the 14 gentlemen who we play fantasy football with, half of them seem to really, really hate this new IDP scoring, and half of them seem to really love if you hit on the 20-point train. Stevie had me look into this, and I don't have the stats right in front of me, but it's been pretty spot on where 11 to 14 guys every week score 20 or more fantasy points. So you're choosing from an enormous pool, but there's enough of us there's enough guys out there for every one of us to get that really big piece of the pie. I personally like the scoring. I think it rewards more players, which I think is important. But I will say, my God, predicting who's going to pop and who's not is a fucking nightmare this season.
And that's the only thing I don't like about it is it's so unpredictable. Like, again, none of us know what's going to happen come Sunday or Monday, but there's some level of predictability to the offensive guys. There's just nothing with that defense.
Yeah, sometimes you get a premonition on a late Thursday morning that you need to have Patrick Queen on your team. So you wake up at 4 a.m. and go sign him. And then he gets you 4 fantasy points, none in the first half. So go Patrick Queen. Dan, you have any week 6, week 7 takeaways?
I mean, my thing is just how unpredictable this season has been. It's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a super fun end of the season. I think the playoffs. I think just with the unpredictability it's been, I see like a 5 or 6 seed team end up winning this all this year.
That should be fun. Kirk Herbstreit was saying on Thursday night that it's kind of what we've been saying, that September was basically the preseason, and it's time for players to start playing better now, and we're starting to see it. You brought up Jamar Chase earlier, so it's going to be interesting to see as we get into November football if these guys are polished and ready to play football. So let's get into those playoff teams, Dan. Let's just go with our 2 teams. Let's start off with our 2 teams that we have on the bye weeks. So I'm going to go Stevie and Phil. Obviously very chalk as they lead the league right now, but they're both sitting at 6 wins. I don't think the schedule's too badly against them. So I'm giving the bye weeks to Stevie and Phil.
I have Terry and yourself.
Whoa. I literally said me and Terry are the teams in danger of missing the playoffs. I think you have way too much faith in me for the end of the season and the schedule. Where do you have Stevie and Phil?
I have Phil at number 3. I have Stevie at number 5. I think the injuries are going to crush Steve, and his lack of depth on his team has him in some trouble at this point. I could actually see a world where Steve doesn't even make the playoffs at all.
Wow. Stevie was predicting that we were going to shit on his team last week. I have him still as my number 1.
I wouldn't even call it crapping on his team because it's just
said he's not going to make the playoffs.
I said I see a world. I still have him at number 5. I still have him in my playoffs. I'm not predicting he doesn't. I'm just saying there's a world that exists that Steve is not going to hold on to this playoff spot.
I'm just happy to see that you gave Phil some respect at this point, moving him up to that number 3 spot. For both of these guys, I put that, Phil is strong where it matters. Tight end and flex is going to determine whether or not he keeps the bye. Stevie has a very strong lineup, but I actually agree with you. I put that injuries will determine whether or not he's going to keep the bye. Terry comes in at my number 3. You have him at number 1. Strong to bottom and might have strong top to bottom. He might have the best depth of any team. He's most likely to steal a bye week. I was down on his team last week, but the more I look at it, I really kind of like what he's put together. And then I can't remember. I'm going to look at his roster right now. There was something about his team. Raheem Mostert playing very well. The Dallas defense, it must not have been Terry's team. Brandon Ayuk. I was wondering if he should start Brandon Ayuk, but that's a conversation for later. The Jamar Chase thing kind of helps out his Tyler Boyd. So I think things have really shaken out well for Terry at this point. So I know you said you have Phil at 3. Who are your 4 and 6?
4 and 6, I have Taylor at 4 and Greg at 6.
Okay, you do have Greg sneaking in at this point, huh?
Yeah, his team is playing well. I mean, he's putting up points, and he's made moves. He's made the right moves. Shaking out well for him.
So I think the only one we have different then is I have Mott's still making the playoffs. So take a second and tell the world why you hate Rob Mott's team.
I don't hate Rob Mott's team. He's actually someone I thought early in the season was going to do very well, but he's just been struggling to put up points. If Aaron Jones can keep going with his Josh Allen, I think he'll be in good shape. You just need to see it happen first. He needs to make a move for a receiver. Cortland Sutton isn't the answer this year. Christian Kirk doesn't look like he's going to be able to consistently put it up the way he hoped. Mike Williams being hurt is really going to help, depending on how long he's going to be out. Darren Waller's been a disappointment. If any of those things turn around, as Kirk Herbstreit said, people are going to start stepping up hopefully soon, then yeah, he's right in the mix. But if you ask me this very moment, I think Rob's a bubble team on the outside looking in.
I'll give him a little credit. Austin Eckler, for you folks who don't know, Austin Eckler, big fantasy football guy, actually does a fantasy football show with Yahoo, I believe, says Josh Palmer is going to step in admirably for Mike Williams and that he has him on all of his fantasy rosters. So I have myself at 4. Schedule's playing very nice with me, as you brought up, Dan. The fantasy gods are smiling on me. I have Rob at 5. I put that he has some holes, but Josh Allen's going to cover those holes. I'm not worried about it. I have Taylor at 6, healthy, probably one of the best teams. But is this just an off year for Taylor's guys? They don't seem to all want to show up in the same week. Top to bottom, it's hard to argue with his roster. I have you and Xavier still as the front runners for the playoffs. I have Greg just behind you guys. Kenny just fell the fuck off. I don't know what's going to go on there, but I have you 4 still in contention. So for it being the halfway point of the season and 10 teams are legitimately vying for playoff spots, and I don't think anybody's spot, like you just brought up, Stevie isn't exactly safe. I don't think anybody's spot is safe at this point.
Well, you kind of got on me for the whole my comment about Steve not making it. What are your odds of Steve making the playoffs right now? Where do you put it at?
Steve and Phil, I have at 100%. They're at 6 wins. You need to get to 8 wins. They're going to win 2 more. I'm not concerned at all. So, yeah, because we're sitting at 6-1. Yeah, so they have 7 games left, and then Stevie has to beat Horvath in final week, so there's a win. Phil does have to beat you, which sounded hard at first, and now we don't know what it's going to be, which one of your teams is going to show up. So, but Stevie has a guaranteed win with Horvath at the end of the year, unless Horvath.
The way injuries are playing out for Steve, you can't guarantee that win for him, man. I don't think you can.
I will say, and I brought this up last week, that I thought he started doing himself a disservice with his bench is just not as good as it once was. So, and the loss of Breece Hall certainly hurts. So
you also have to look at the fact that, in a normal year, 8 wins gets you in. But with 10 teams still in this, does 8 wins enough? It's going to be 8 wins and a tiebreakers. I mean, he does have a lot of points, so he should get tiebreakers. But is 8 wins going to be enough?
Well, one of the 10 teams I'm talking about is sitting at 3 wins right now. It's unlikely Kenny even gets to 8 wins. So I could say that he's out. I'm just not quite there yet. So I don't know. Weird year, but we're basically same exact playoff teams with the exceptions of Greg and Motts, and you have Motts as one of your first teams out. Week 7 I went 4-3, putting me at 32-17 on my picks on the season. Dan, I had my first 4 right, the 4 games that I always say don't matter, and then my last 3, the games that I thought mattered the most. I got every one of those wrong.
I went 5-2. I'm 28-21.
28-21, so I'm enjoying a 4-game lead. All right, as I always do, I have the games ranked of importance. I think we can all agree that the least important game of the week is going to be Brian and his 1 win versus JR and his 1 win, though it could be a preview of the first draft pick matchup if these guys get hot in the playoffs, and JR certainly set himself up for the first draft pick matchup, and I assume he has his own first pick. I can take a look at that, but what are your thoughts on Brian versus JR?
I think JR having Burrow is going to put him over the top. My understanding is Burrow is pretty.
He does not have his own first pick.
He's pretty focused on. Burrow's never beaten the Browns. He's 0-3 against them, and he's pretty focused on making sure that stops now this week. So I think he could have a big week even without Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I essentially said the same thing. I said Brian can't afford for Lamar to be average. I'm sure Brian is happy to see Lamar. I mean, I think Lamar scored this week more than he scored the last 2 weeks combined since Brian's acquired him. So Brian can't afford for Lamar Jackson to even be just average, and I think Joe Burrow pulls this off for him, so I'm picking JR in this one as well. The next matchup is just a David versus Goliath, Phil versus Horvath, 6 wins versus 0 wins. When I was doing my little evaluation of this game, I think it's going to end up being a blowout. Everyone on Thursday did what they were supposed to do. Horvath's good players are in bad matchups, and Phil's team is just full of good matchups. I'm picking Phil to win this one handily.
He should. Yeah, I agree. Phil should walk away with this one.
So yeah, and that brings Phil to that 7th win. And like I said, I do think 8 wins probably get you into the playoffs this year to kind of work backwards onto that.
It should. If you get 8 wins, you should be in the playoffs, but just it's been a crazy year. You just never know.
Yep. And I'll be honest, every one of the next, 5 games have pretty good playoff implications. Darren versus Rob Darren's obviously playing for the first pick right now, though I again think he doesn't have his own first pick. So I gotta quit saying that. I guess I need to pay attention to who has their own first pick. Rob sitting at 4 wins obviously needs to win this game. I'll let you lead off on this one.
I have Rob winning this matchup. I think like the Josh Allen versus Sam Ellinger is enough for me. I guess you can always, Eleanor, you don't know what you're going to get, but I'm not expecting much out of a 6th-round rookie starting for the Colts. I think the Colts are waving the white flag on the season. And then the fact he has Hines right there with them, it should be a good win for Rob.
Yeah, that's kind of basically what I put as well. I think it's another blowout. I think Rob's better players are in better matchups. I love the Irv Smith stream for Rob this week. I'm big on Irv Smith this week. I don't know if Rob's even going to have to get an IDP. It's going to be interesting to see how he's playing that, if it's going to be a roster spot thing like I did a few weeks ago. Hindsight is 2020, but I think Devin Duvernay was probably the better start for Darren. I'm not big on Curtis Samuel with Taylor Heineke. It seems like Heineke is definitely leading Terry McLaurin. I don't know if it's going to be enough to have changed the outcome of this matchup, but it's just certainly not one of my favorite calls from the Thursday night games. Next up, which is interesting because, like I said, every one of these matchups matter quite a bit. But I guess with this one, it's a great matchup, but the playoff implications aren't quite there. Stevie versus Taylor. 6-win Stevie versus 4-win Taylor. Thursday really helped Taylor's out because Stevie's guys were just plain average. And I think every Sunday matchup actually benefits Taylor, except maybe the fact that Stevie's starting Amon-Ra in the flex. I don't even know if Amon-Ra is going to play this game. I hope he does. But all in all, I think Taylor wins, and I think he wins pretty well. I'm going to give Taylor a 10-point victory in this game.
Oh, I think more than that. I'll say 20.
Ooh.
I think it's time for Taylor's team to get right. I'm calling it. This week is the week Taylor's team gets it going.
Okay. Next up, again, sort of similar situation. My 5 wins versus Greg's 4 wins. Obviously, we both need the win, but it's these games this week. It's you versus Dan, or it's you versus Terry, and then it's Kenny versus Xavier. They're all just crazy. So again, I don't know how much playoff implication is here. We both need the win. I'll let you start off on this one.
I think Greg gets this win. If you had your normal guys there with Mahomes and Kelsey, I'd have
he caught me on a good week.
He caught you on the week. I caught Terry on the good week to play Terry. It's nice to be on that side of it. I think he ends up with this win, and if you had Allen, you're just missing everybody. So I think Greg gets this one.
So IDP obviously continues to fuck me, but here's what I think's working for me. The Zeke being out thing is a double-edged sword because he has Pollard, and I think Pollard fucking eats this week, especially after what we saw Ramondre Stevenson do to the Bears last week. Debo being out is what I think draws this back to me because now he has wide receiver issues. He started Gabe Davis. He has to go sign a wide receiver. He doesn't have anybody to put in his wide receiver 2 spot right now. And so I think that's where it's going to help me. I don't even know who's out there for him to sign. I haven't done a big dive into that. That could be the big thing. The Pollard boost definitely helps him. But what I think might happen here is I'm hoping I can finally get a defense and special teams right. I think the Colts are ready to come out and beat up on Taylor Heineke. I'm hoping for 3-4 turnovers, maybe a touchdown in that. While I'm failing at IDP, the Colts defense is going to bring me back into this game. So I'm picking myself to win on the back of the Indianapolis Colts defense. Dan, I got you and Terry next. It's essentially the same exact situation as the previous game. Everybody needs the win. It's another great matchup. I think a loss would absolutely kill you right now. It's just not something you can afford at this point. The running back matchups favor Terry, but the wide receiver matchups favor you. Evans handled business on Thursday. You have the best 2 fantasy defenses taking off. I'm a guy who's always loved fantasy defense. To see Dallas and Philly going against each other this week in a game that matters is just absolutely awesome. So for me, I think this game 100% comes down to the quarterbacks, and I am predicting a Jared Goff rebound. I think Jared Goff is going to bounce back in this game and outplay your quarterback, and I think Terry takes the W.
I'm actually going to have Terry win as well on the backs of Derrick Henry going against Houston, Waddle going against Detroit. I think those two could have very big games for Terry. So it hurts that I catch Terry on the best possible week to play him, and I'm not gonna get the win. So
yeah, it makes it a little rough. I want to tell a quick story. Some of the league already knows this story because it affects the next game and this game. Because everyone's been, asking if I'm going to trade Travis Kelce, this, that, and the other. But so before the season started, I actually went to Terry and offered him Travis Kelce for Kyle Pitts and a 1. And Terry just kind of laughed at me. Like, I'm not going to also give you a draft pick in this younger tight end. And then Terry lets the tight end go. And now Kyle Pitts is rotting on Xavier's bench behind Dallas Goedert and not even good enough to start in this league. And it's funny because me and Xavier are in another league together, and we were talking trades this week. And he's like, if you want Pitts so bad, because I'm going after Pitts in the Dynasty League, he's like, if you want Pitts so bad in the Maslin League, go ahead and just send me Kelsey. And I couldn't help but laugh that I was offering Kelsey in a 1 at one point. And Dan, you've said this more than anyone I know, and it may be your thing. Maybe you've heard it somewhere. But you said sometimes the best trades you make are the ones that you don't make, and they get declined. And my goodness, Terry, thank you very much for declining that trade, because I would be crying right now. I'd be considering quitting the league. What's even the point if I don't have Travis Kelce in my life?
That's just an original thought from me. I didn't get that from anywhere else. But man, there are trades I look back at that I'm thankful didn't get accepted, and there's also some trades I wish wouldn't have got accepted.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold that one over Terry's head for a while, and then finally, easily, I would say the most important matchup of the week is Kenny versus Xavier. These are two teams that are now out of the playoffs. Statistically not in the playoffs right now is what I mean to say. They are two teams that need this win. Both need this win. And I think it's very likely, even with Xavier being a 4-win team and me saying, these other 4-win teams can afford the loss, I don't think he can afford the loss to Kenny. I think that's going to be his issue. So I think the loser of this game is probably out of the playoff race, especially if it's Kenny at this point. That's just the nail in the coffin. There's a lot going on in this game. I think it's a slight running back edge to Xavier, but I think Tyreek gives a big edge to Kenny. I don't love Jerry Jeudy and Greg Dulcich with the backup. Well, I guess Russell Wilson's starting now, so it's not the backup quarterback, but still playing in London where it's never a good game. But then when you look at Xavier's team, does Roquan Smith even want to play football anymore? He was like crying after the Robert Quinn trade. And then is Christian McCaffrey ready to be a thing in San Francisco? There are fewer questions on Kenny's team, and I really like Tyreek Hill this week. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Kenny to take this win and keep himself in the playoff conversation.
I have Xavier winning. I think Kenny's team is done. I think that trade sunk his ship. Tua and Hill could have big weeks against Detroit, as I mentioned earlier, with Waddle for Terry, but I just don't think it's enough. When you look
I don't know that Detroit defense. I mean, Geno Smith was the QB1 against that defense a few weeks ago. I just feel like this could be a very big week where Tua and Tyreek are enough to pull that win.
It's possible. When you look at the rest of Kenny's team, it's just not enough. Whereas I think that ETN getting the full workload now, I just think look at the overall situation that Xavier has with his team versus the overall Kenny's team. Xavier gets the win. I'm not saying it's gonna be a blowout. I think it's gonna be a close game.
Yeah, it should be. But I think the only two picks we disagree on this week are I'm taking Kenny, you're taking Xavier, and then you're taking Greg, I'm taking myself. So that should be an interesting one. Last week, we introduced some fun for you guys to join in, and only 2 of you actually joined us. So if the rest of you are watching the show this long, join the fucking game. Drop something in the chat. Shoot me a text. But we wanted you to pick the top scoring quarterback and the top scoring flex player, if you will, any other player in the league. So I took Lamar and Josh Jacobs. Dan, you took Justin Herbert and Tyreek Hill. Stevie combined Lamar and Tyreek Hill. And then Kenny, to the chorus of laughter, stuck with his own guys and then traded them. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And boy, was Kenny right at 71 points. Joe Burrow outscored all of the rest of our matchups. I did pick the highest flex player with Josh Jacobs dropping 34 points. So I felt pretty good about that, but Lamar certainly choked that game away. So Kenny, week 7, the very first winner of this new game we've created. Dan, who are your picks this week?
I'm going to take Tua against Detroit as my quarterback.
Hold the fuck on.
I think he's going to have a good week. I just don't think it's enough with Kenny's roster to be able to get him the win. I think Xavier's roster is better. He has a better overall team. It's not, you don't get the win for having the top scoring player in the matchup. You get the win for having the most points scored by the entire team. Jerry Jeudy could walk away with 2 points. Dulcich could get up with 1 point. He could absolutely still lose this game with Tua getting 40 points this week. It is within the realm possibility. I'm taking
Tua and
Justin Jefferson.
Ooh,
against Arizona.
I'm with it. Obviously, you got some good players there. I actually agree with you a little bit on Tua, which is why I'm taking Tyreek Hill as my flex player and why I'm still picking Kenny's team. I think Tyreek has a absolute monster week, and I'm taking Jalen Hurts as my quarterback. I think the Pittsburgh defense without my guy TJ Watt is just going to be completely susceptible. I think Jalen Hurts is playing on a different level this year, and they're coming off of a bye. I just really love that for them. So I'm taking Jalen Hurts, Tyreek Hill. Dan is taking Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Jefferson. If you guys want to get some picks in, get them in before the 1 o'clock game tomorrow and get yourself some congratulations on the chat. Dan, before we jump off here tonight, do you have any parting words for our friends in the league?
I love you guys. Have fun. Enjoy your week.
I don't really love you guys. And I really don't like you, Greg, this week. Don't worry. It's a 1 week thing. As soon as this week's over, I'll like you a lot more. I hope your team fails miserably. I hope you're out of the playoffs. And I hope my team does so much better than you this week because I need this win. You don't. You just got in the league. Everybody have a great Saturday. Sorry the show was late this week. We might be back on our regular time next week, and we might be back with Xavier. We'll let you know. And then Rob, we'll get you on. Just remind us sometime. Have a good night, guys.